few things about the list of applications from a sort of practical point of view. Some of this will have come up already. And as you know, these applications are really aiming to find and support some of the best and brightest talent. So as you've heard already, this is a one-off pot of money. It's gone up recently to £300,000. It's a fairly short application process, and you can spend it over a 5-year period of time. So one eligibility criteria is that you have a position over that period of time. You can't use this money to fund your own position, but you can use it otherwise very flexibly. You can use it to employ research staff, PhD students, use it on consumables and equipment. And we don't go into the details too much about what you're actually going to spend it on. We don't keep a massively close check on that. So who can apply? So you have to be between 3 to 10 years post PhD or MD. And there is some, if you've had time off for various reasons, for example, maternity leave, then we take that into account. It is early stage. It is meant to support your career and help you move forward. So we're not looking for people who are already professors, because then you've already made it. So we're looking for people who are establishing or have fairly recently established their group. And, quite often we're looking at applications from people who are between, 2 to 6 years in terms of having established themselves as independent scientists. So just to take you through the process. So the applications open in July and close in September. And then the applications between October and November are then scored by the scientific committee. So we usually get round about 125 applications. There are 12 committee members, and we divide the applications up. So each application is looked at by 2 to 3 members of the scientific committee. So they look at the applications, they score them, and then we have a long listing process where we then long list round about 32 to 35 applications, and that takes place in November. So those applications at that point go out to external expert review. So in terms of going back to some of the questions that were asked earlier, you can see that the applications are reviewed by the scientific committee, who are all excellent and all expert in their own field, but of course they're not likely to be expert in all of these applications. And then they go out to expert review. And we usually try to get at least 3 expert external reviews of each application. These then come back in, and between February and April, the scientific committee again review all 30, whatever it is, 32, 33 applications alongside the reviews. And each committee member scores the application. And we also take into account how expert that committee member feels they are in that particular field. And then we do a shortlisting process from there. And we don't just literally look at the scores. We spend quite a lot of time looking at the committee members' comments and going back and looking at the external reviews. But at that point, we will shortlist round about 10 or 11 applications. They then come to interview in May, and depending on how much money is available, we then tend to award between 6 and 8 applications. We awarded 8 this year. So you can find out more about all of this on the Lister website. I think that's well worth a look. You can look at the eligibility criteria. There are frequently asked questions. And there's some very nice articles on reflection. There's a particularly nice one, again, going back to something that was said earlier from Chris Stewart about having put in 3 applications and with the third one being successful. So this idea about not being resilient, not being put off by failure. So you've heard a lot of this already. Why apply? It's flexible funding. You will, if you are awarded one of these fellowships, become part of a family of current fellows and alumni. It's a diverse research community. You've got ready access to mentorship. You get the opportunity to apply for the summer studentships, which are very popular and I think very successful. And those students can then come to the Lister meeting, which takes part in Oxford each year. And it's prestigious. It says a lot about you. It's a real mark of peer respect. So I think that's it.
Okay. And now we will have our panel discussion with 3 members of the Lister Scientific Committee, including a representative for this island, which is Cleona. And I'd like to just start with questions from the audience.
So that would be one of the aims of this event, is to try and raise awareness within our institutes that we really do have to find ways of supporting our rising young stars. Because you're absolutely right, in Ireland there's so little to support the postdoc, the person who has been a postdoc in a PI's lab and who's now going to independence. And that's exactly, so one of our aims tonight and over the next is to try and get somebody in Ireland to double the Lister money, to double it.
So can I invite you to expand on that a little bit, but wearing also your hat as a senior Irish academic? I think we encounter this problem for ERC grants also.
Yes.
And what normally happens is several meetings with Dean so-and-so, and then you get a guarantee from the university, because of course if you get an ERC grant, university is incentivized to want to keep you. Do we have that type of comprehension with respect to Lister?
Certainly not before today. And certainly this is only kind of beginning the conversation to try and get the commitment from our institutes. And this is precisely why we have representation from the IUA here. I don't know if you'd like to comment, Paul, on it? On whether you think that this is something that...
It's by no means an expert comment. It's been a fascinating learning experience for me, just to say, for our English audience, British audience, I should say, the Irish Universities Association, the equivalent of the Russell Group, so the advocacy organisation for Ireland's research-intensive universities. We've just completed our pre-budget submission to the Irish Government for next year's budget, making the case that Thomas made so eloquently for the need, generally not just in the research area, but to put much more money into higher education, given the very favourable public expenditure situation here, and the fact that in competitiveness terms and all the rest of it, it's fundamental. So I think this is a key part of the wider argument. We got money last year, 750 million over 5 years for research infrastructure, but I know James Lawless is interested in how we sort of create a bigger pipeline of PhDs and postdocs, and he's interested in things like industrial PhDs and all the rest of it. So I think it's an argument that needs to be developed and an evidence base and all the rest of it. But I think there is at least the readiness to listen, and what Thomas said about the quote unquote boring job, but the repetitive job of just finding the arguments, hammering away, talking to as many people as possible, enlisting big business and others, I think is crucial.
Could I piggyback on that question and put it to the panel that that problem wasn't a problem for welcome fellowships when they were a thing, because we had them in Ireland too. And it was very easy to give someone the guarantee of employment at the university for the duration of the welcome fellowship without any expectation about what came after that. So that worked quite smoothly. And since this is a fellowship, do you think there is scope in the future for expanding it to allow for it being also autonomous in terms of individual's salary?
Well, that's a very good question. It used to be a fellowship. So it changed from being a fellowship to a prize in about 2003, something like that. And there were financial reasons, as I understand it. You might know more about that. So I can't answer that question about whether there is any possibility of ever going back to being a fellowship, which is what you're asking, really. So at the moment, it isn't a fellowship, and that's why the applicant's salary can't be covered by it.
Okay.
And I would think it unlikely, actually, that in the near future. But I wanted to say how I used to approach this when I was at University of Dundee, and I was Dean of School of Life Sciences, and we were quite successful at winning Lister fellowships, which is, so we would typically recruit junior group leaders onto a 5-year tenure track system. So that is, you can see that's pretty difficult or awkward with the 5-year requirement. What it essentially meant was that there was sort of a binary choice you would have to make. You can apply, as I did. I was a one of the first iteration prize winners. I was recruited onto a tenure track position, and effectively, because I'd been advised by a former fellow. So the moment I got my contract, I applied for the Lister. So they started, which I was successful. So they started at exactly the same time, and I had my 5 years tenure track, and I had my 5 years Lister. And we might come on to whether or not that's a good strategy in the modern day. Then the second sort of obvious strategy is then if somebody is successful at being confirmed in position and they're still within that 10-year window, so you're an ECR, you start off, you're absolutely fantastic, you get confirmed after year 4 and you're still within 10 years, now you're eligible for the prize, so you're a sort of a more senior established person going into the prize. When you get the prize. And then I had frequently conversations of people who were in that awkward intermediate position. They didn't have, they'd perhaps been in post for just a couple of years. Everything was going absolutely fantastic, great publication, some great breakthrough. And they said, can we apply now? Then what I would have to do is I would have to say, okay, I am prepared just for the purposes of this award to underwrite your salary for an extra 2 years, if and only if you get the Lister prize. And I did that successfully. So somebody got the prize, they got underwritten. Of course, by the time they've won the prize, they're going to do great guns. It's not much of a risk, frankly. So I would say there are 3 different ways that you can sort of try and shoehorn a Lister application into a non-tenured but independent role. These have to be independent roles. These aren't for postdocs. These are for independent, so newly appointed academic researchers.
I think applications where it's really clear what question you're asking and that you've got a really important question and that you are doing whatever it requires to answer that question. And that's something that is going to take your career forward and that it's clear. So one of the questions we often ask on the committee is when we're looking at these applications is, how is this application going to be transformative for this applicant? So what's different about it? What's important about it? How is it going to really take this person forward?
I think Chris made a really important point about it being really clear, to follow on just from what Anne is saying. And I certainly find that what really helps me focus in on is good illustrations and strong preliminary data. And the other point that Chris made was the technology. If you can demonstrate that you've got a really great technology, either through collaboration or yourself, and that you're delivering really cool results with that technology, and you can illustrate it allied with a clear question. The winners always have that combination. That's a whole combination, I know. But that's why going back again, and who made, Aga said, you cannot, and I'm a terrible last minute person, but you cannot do a good proposal in the last 2 weeks, because you need to have it seen by several different people. Not just different people will pick out different things. And so you have to lay yourself bare to be flayed, but it will be better. It will be better if you can do it again and again.
And completely agree with that. But if you think back to Anne's timeline, actually most of the critical decisions are made by the panel, and that is because, and I think that's absolutely right. External review is useful, I think, for addressing technical issues. I think it's relatively poor at really ranking or understanding the real importance of things. So yes, you have to write for the external reviewers, because you've got to get through them. They're gonna punt out any sort of technical flaws or conceptual flaws. But ultimately, you're writing for the panel members, the generalists, because in those final stages, everybody is reviewing so at the beginning we may give and may allocate the immunology to cleaner, but by the time we've come back to we're getting ready to decide who to take to interview, it's coming to me. I don't know anything about immunology. I've got to be excited by what you say. I'm going to rely on cleaner to tell me there's real stuff there, but I get it, I understand it, that's really exciting. And then coming back to the thing about Lizzie, and at the end there are these poor children who, if this all works out, you're going to change their lives. So you've tugged my heartstrings as well. Fantastic science. And
just to reiterate, you don't have to have poor children.
This is just my perfect. You've got a fantastic track record, and you've done all the little things that Olga said. If you're absolutely the best applicants are the ones they haven't. They are at the start of their career. And they've done those little things just to show, they can, they've got experience of, they've spoken at a big conference, they've got a little award from company of biologists or whatever to go to the meeting, they won a poster prize, you've ticked all the little boxes, and wow, that's a fantastic thing about immunology that even I can understand, and there's little children at the end of it. That is the perfect for me.
If I can comment, I have seen 3 Lister applications from this island from absolutely outstanding individuals that failed because they copy and pasted grants that were conservative but excellent, and they didn't really take feedback or prepare specifically for this particular funding opportunity. So I think it's very important for people to take feedback. I'm going to invite the panel now to speak more broadly on the future of Lister Institute, both in biomedicine and in Ireland. What does success look like for Lister over the next 10 to 20 years?
Specifically in terms of the Irish relationship?
In terms of, I suppose it's a two-pronged question. One, in terms of the way biomedical research is going in the world and what Lister's leadership looks like to you there. But perhaps more pragmatically, the British-Irish relationship with respect to what we're all here for, and what would you like that to look like in 10 to 20 years' time?
Yeah. So I think in terms of the more general question, for the Lister to continue, picking out and supporting really first-class scientists and helping them to move forward, and in 10 or 20 years' time to be able to look back and see that the people that had been supported by these prizes were going on to do exciting science and impactful science. I think that's what we are hoping to achieve. And in terms of the relationship with Ireland, really it would be it's our wish to be able to have more of those really good scientists who are coming from Ireland, because we know they're here. So we want to be able to support those good people. So people with really high potential, we want to find them and we want to fund them.
Other comments?
I would have thought the collaborations, to establish and strengthen collaborations. I mean, this meeting in Oxford is to die for. It really is just wonderful. You're hearing the smartest young people from diverse backgrounds presenting their science. These are the most recent fellows all presented. Then other fellows are invited back, and then the scientific. And there's just such opportunity there. So you could measure the success in terms of additional funding that they would have grown out of those collaborations, and then actual deliverables. And then the other thing that we really need is the academic. So we all need external examiners for the courses, we need PhD examiners, and the best way you can have of establishing a high standard, and I'm always saying this, is by being able to invite people from a university that's better than your own, hopefully going to. So I would see that as being a potential outcome.
So if I could just summarize that's more prize winners based in Ireland, then it would be great. And as a consequence to that, there are more Irish-based researchers coming to our fellowship meetings. So there's more collaborations, there's more networking, there's more, that creates more visibility in Ireland. It would be great to see more people such as Rebecca, moving from the UK to Ireland, or Ireland to the UK. So we're working together. We have more people like Cliona on the scientific committee that when you're asked, you do reviews for us. That can always be a bit of a pain, and that possibly via the Royal Irish Academy, Lister is involved in these wider funding and political discourses that I think Tomas is so keen for us to be involved with.
Could I ask one specific question related to what we were talking about before? I know from experience that when engaging at a European level for funding, many civil servants in Brussels will make the point, rightly, that no matter how much money we throw at research in Europe, coordination and coherence between European member states in terms of funding mechanism and in terms of career structure is one of the main hindrances to movement around Europe, and is something that we need to make fluent for science in Europe. And it seems to me that with science being a useful bridge for the UK to come back to Europe in so many respects, and it's wonderful that you're back in Horizon Europe and the European Research Council, that Lister could play a role in helping to harmonise structures between the UK and Ireland. And this would be a very good model, I think, for harmonisation in Europe in general. We already have very similar university structures. We already have the Lister Institute and the Wellcome Trust. It seems to me that the harmonisation of the Medical Research Council and other research councils with Research Ireland would bootstrap a lot of things and save us a lot of hassle. And further, the point that was just made about clinical medicine, I think that the influence and the prestige that the Lister Institute has could do a lot to help shepherd Irish medicine, to support Irish science in a way that is more similar to what we see in the UK. So there's a virtuous cycle that could emerge from this. Do you see a role in that, and a role in contributing to coherence between these islands other than simply recruiting Irish prize winners?
That would be great, but I would say I'm quite worried about politics in the UK at the moment. That I think, put in different words, what your words would be anathema to a lot of voters who might vote, for example, for reform, who do not, I think in the UK there is a danger that there is a political consensus against universities, against research, which is there, and against sort of rejoining the EU by the back door. So although I would like to say, yes, Leicester's very happy to roll its sleeves out, work with other organisations, the Academy of Medical Sciences, the RIA, and so on, to do that, I think we have quite a job on our hands to get mainstream political parties behind universities, behind the research agenda. And sorry if that's too pessimistic. So Anne and Cliona can, maybe put a more brighter.
Yeah, I mean, I identify with what you're saying, and I think that it is we've got some uphill battles. I do think we need to all work together on this, though. I think these scientific institutes need to come together to harmonise and work in the same direction. And just going on to what you also said about clinical academics, as far as I know, I mean, the problems for clinical academics in Ireland are very similar to the problems for clinical academics in the rest of in the UK. Clinical academics are up against it at the moment. So I think, that's another really important point where I think it is important that we move in the same direction.
And that's why your point about us needing to be organised, more organised in how we communicate the importance of what we do, because back to your point about the supporting of early career researchers in our universities, there's such a tendency to put all the emphasis on teaching, on numbers of students coming through and going out. Yes, and so we have to keep pushing back on that, and that's exactly why we need some sort of organisation.
Well, I think that's a wonderful note to end this session on, right on time. So to join me in thanking the panel.
Well, I've learned a lot today. To be quite frank, I didn't know enough about the Lister Institute, despite spending 8 years of my career in the UK. So I certainly, a bit late for me. I'm much closer to retirement than applying for a Lister Award. What I heard today, though, I picked up on 3 points. I love Cliona's comment about fail better. So I looked up the precise quote from Samuel Beckett. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. That doesn't just describe scientific careers, it probably describes all careers, right? And the more determined you are, the more likely you are to succeed. So try again. But what does it actually mean to fail better? For us as scientists, it means to write better grants, to learn better grantmanship. And early on in my career, and I think it's a common enough mistake, you're trying to impress how smart you are, without realizing how busy review panels are. And unless your great idea jumps out of the page in the most simple language possible, you're going to be on the reject heap. You probably won't even get to interview. If you get to interview, the same rules apply. Simplicity. There's nothing worse than a cluttered slide with superfluous information. You have to communicate succinctly and as simply as possible. So I would urge everyone considering any applications. In my own case, since coming back to Ireland in 2001, I've been continuously funded, so I have learned some good rules about grantsmanship. And even during the horrible period after the demise of the Celtic Tiger, managed to keep afloat. And if you're submitting an application just before the deadline, and it's a rush job, it's a waste of time. A good application is more like poetry than prose. Every line has to be honed. These applications are blissfully short. It's much harder to write a short application that's coherent and communicates the message. I've started taking to reading out my applications line by line, reading it out loud. When I read it out loud, I suddenly see the flaw in the sentence and I can correct it. I don't see it when I'm reading it. Better still to read it to a senior colleague. It makes a difference. So you have to be prepared, and being prepared is not hitting the submit button on a rush job. Secondly, the Irish institutions, they need to be educated more. A lot of our colleagues in UK universities are much more proactive about selecting good applications. I would fear that the Irish institutions will just open the floodgates and let anyone submit any old application, hitting that submit button in a premature way, and that would not do Irish universities a service. So I would advocate for systems much like you have in Birmingham. In my own small way, we've done it in the centre I founded when I first moved to Galway, Centre of Chromosome Biology. And in this room, a colleague, Mihailo Merkovich, who just got a Wellcome Trust Career Development Award, he benefited from our mentorship. We brought him over to Galway, we mentored him all the way through the process. Without mentorship, the institutions are failing in their duty. So my advice to anyone from the institutions in this room is get organized. Start having these one-stop shops we talked about was a great idea for early career researchers. Mock interviews, absolutely essential. And before the submit button is ever pressed, Chris had some great advice. Run it by serious colleagues. I loved the idea. That first paragraph of introduction had a line drawn through it with bland, one word. That made you write a good introduction, right? And finally, Tomas mentioned the Oppenheimer effect. That's what made science so big in America. They were underperforming until then. They're forgetting that lesson. Unfortunately, Europe forgot it before them. And guess who's now learning that lesson? China, okay? So it's all about advocacy. What can we do as scientists to advocate for science to the general public and to politicians? We're very poor at it. I try my best in Galway with local politicians, bring them into the Centre of Chromosome Biology and let them play with microscopes. They always leave them impressed. That's the sort of thing we have to do, and we're not very good at doing it. So fail better. One-shop stops essentially for the institutions, and advocacy would be the messages I've gleaned from this tremendous meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so I've just got a few closing comments. The first thing I'd like to announce is this meeting has already been a great success, and that's not only because I've learned a lot, Noel's learned a lot, we've all been talking and so on, but actually we do have, I can exclusively reveal, we do have another Ireland-based Lister Prize winner. I'm afraid I'm not at liberty to give their name because this was in the very last round, chaired by Anne, and the names will be announced shortly. So we've already gone up 50%. So that's fantastic. But there will be more, I'm sure, as a consequence of this meeting. So it's very important that this is a dialogue between all of us. And I know you've been, people have been saying things to me. Lister needs to learn how to work better with Ireland. We are going to collect feedback. Is that on? Oh, that's right. So we're going to collect feedback by email afterwards, but it'd be better if it's hot off the press. So please take the QR code and you can answer some questions, and that will really be important to us, so as we can learn about not only what you thought about the event, but how we can make this relationship work better. Then I have a series of thank yous. First of all, to Noel and the Royal Irish Academy. I've never been here before. I'm afraid I didn't know about it before, but I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. It really does seem to be a super partner for Lister. So please, let's carry on working together. It's a absolutely lovely old building, super location, and everything's worked perfectly. So thank you to them. I'd like to thank the Lister governing body who sort of approved this event, and in particular Rory Guinness for putting his weight behind it, and he's such makes such a great contribution to the Lister board. So thank you to the board and to Rory. I'd like to thank the other members of the steering group. That's Clina, Thomas, Rebecca, Marie, Nicola, and Julie. I'd like to thank the fellows who've travelled here from England, Arga, Chris, and Lizzie. I'd like to give my very special thanks to Marie Lamb, who is works with Cleona at TCD. She's done all the local coordination, done an absolutely fantastic job of it, quietly, efficient, and so on. Absolutely wonderful. And so I think we would like to present Marie with some indication of our appreciation. Is she here? Yes, she is. And so that's the end of the formal part of the meeting, but it's not over yet. We have a drinks reception that runs until 6:30 in the room where all the refreshments were. So please come and continue this fantastic discussion.